Hello and welcome. I'm Alexander.
I'm Haney.
And I'm Andy.
That is not Simon because he's not here, but we'll get back to that in a bit. We are Native in Tech, covering the latest from the IT industry with a specific focus on Microsoft and how to get actual value from technology. This is episode 247, recorded specially for Data Toboggan Summer 2024. You will be able to find this and our previous episodes on nativeinTech.com, iTunes, Spotify, and on most podcasting platforms, and of course on the Data Toboggan site. So
I feel a deja vu here.
There is a bit of a deja vu, yes.
We shall not speak of the deja vu.
Not until we're almost done, at least.
Yes.
Yes.
I think so.
But we have a list. We have a list of doom. And Andy, how about you walk us through the list that we all know we're not going to be able to cover because we're going to start somewhere and go completely sideways in about 5 minutes.
Of course. I mean, like the first thing is, it's Native in Tech versus Data Toboggan podcast again. And this time, I actually didn't need to pester Alexander to schedule a recording. Alexander actually came to me and said, should we do it again? So we're doing something right. And the other thing, for anyone who hasn't watched this particular special edition podcast, we don't really tend to just rattle through a list of updates to software platforms that's happened over the last few months. This is more of a state of play in which we get to just talk about what's happened over the last few months with our favorite platforms of choice. But yes, the Knee Deep in Tech podcast itself, essential viewing for me on a monthly basis, because that's where you guys talk about updates. You go into detail on those updates as well. So if anyone hasn't checked out the Knee Deep in Tech, we'll put all the links below in the chat. And once this gets uploaded to YouTube, you can, click the links and find it there. So yes, our topics today are, we're going to talk about certification. We're going to have a chat about the DP600, the pros and cons. Maybe myself, I may be a little bit too harsh. Then we might have a chat about, we talked about this before, because Fabric has had such a short lifespan so far. It was only public preview, May last year, end of May. So we're just coming up to about 14 months. It went generally available about 6 or 7 months ago. We'll have a little chat about, are we feeling confident about it yet? And we'll have a chat about the capacity issue when it comes to specific features being enabled. And I'll leave that one for Alexander to build up to, I think.
That sounds really, really exciting. And as you said, we were talking yesterday and we sort of kind of came to the conclusion that there's so many amazing sessions at conferences and you have about 1 billion different kinds of podcasts out there, but they are very technology focused. They're very focused on giving you a lot of information in a pretty short time span, and having this kind of a conversation around technology is surprisingly rare. There are a couple of podcasts that do it, but very few, and you very rarely see something like this at a conference or an event. We've been fortunate enough to be able to do this a couple of times, the Data Minds and Data Saturday Utrecht and Data Saturday Stockholm. So getting to do SQL bits, not to forget, and getting to do this is absolutely gold. So I was super happy to reach out, Andy. I'm just waiting for the day that you go, nah, bored now. I'll do something else. So hopefully that's not going to happen in the short term.
Exactly,
certifications. What about them? What about the DP600?
Okay. Well, if I start first. So, we've spoken before about certifications and what value they bring, first and foremost. So I want to cover the value of the certifications after we talk about this, but we've got Fabric, and it's such a large product. There's data engineering, there's data warehousing, real-time streaming, Power BI's in there. And if anyone's seen, a Fabric presentation where you have, the standard Fabric slide that Microsoft provide everyone, I think it's a legally binding contract to actually provide this slide that talks about all these features. There's a lot there. Plus, each of those services needs administrating. Each of those services needs securing. There's some crossover, sure. But at the moment, we've got a single certification, DP 600, which is the analytics or the Fabric analytics engineer cert. So at the moment, that is a pretty wide and shallow certification. Not shallow in terms of, the content, but just because it's having to cherry pick certain features from quite a wide focus on the product. So from my perspective, and I think Haney, you've spoken about this in the past, it's it's a good start, yes. But now let's kick on. Let's start to introduce some other areas of certification around Fabric. We used to have the certification programs like, MCTS or MCSA and things like that, where you had multiple exams that counted towards a larger qualification. So just personally, I would like to see more exams that cover specific areas of Fabric. Even the administration and CI/CD is a whole huge topic in and of itself. Data engineering, so on and so forth. So perhaps a place in the future where we've got multiple certifications, where one certification on its own can give you a badge, can give you a cert, but a few of them together could be a larger certification. I mean, I don't want to maybe not go back to the days of the SQL Server Masters, but maybe some sort of Fabric guru status.
Yeah, so I've been giving this a lot of thought, and just for context, I wrote my first certification in 1998. That was Windows NT 4. So that was a while ago. And as you said, we used to have the MCSE, or Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer, which was at least 5, most likely 6 certification tests. You took one, you became an MCP, Certified Professional, and you took 5 or 6 and you became an MCSE, and then you could have all kinds of fun. The winds have sort of kind of gone up and down, and the definitely different people having captained the ship. We used to have the MCTS, Technology Specialist. We had the Certified Administrator. We had all kinds of different things. So there's not been really a common thread apart from certifications. The biggest change, I think, was when Microsoft introduced the role-based certifications. It was no longer about a specific technology. It turned into a role, such as infrastructure specialist, the AZ 100s, and so on and so forth. So long-winded story, but I agree. I would love to see a number of associate level certifications, specializing. So one for Power BI, for instance, because a Power BI person is, in my view, unlikely to do heavy data engineering, and is also equally unlikely to do heavy security or whatever. And have a number of those, and then an expert level on top to turn the whole thing into the guru. I mean, the big difference between all the certifications we've ever had and the master was the practical test. That has never been there before or since, because it's so effing expensive. I only know of 2 certifications that still hold practicums, and that's the CCIE, or the Cisco Certified Internet Expert, which is scary difficult, and the Oracle Certified Master, which also does a 2-day practicum somewhere in the world.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, that's impressive. Yeah, I definitely am on the very same lines with all of you on how to approach this. I do think in the long run we do need more certifications. But as said, Fabric is quite new, so I don't think maybe the certificate has been the topmost priority to begin with. You know, I think the certificate itself was a high priority to have, but not to have multiple ones. And as Alexander was pointing to, we even now do have those expert level certifications that you actually do need still, I think, like at least 2 exams that you take to get that expert level certification for something. So I'm personally at least definitely hoping that we get that kind of level for Fabric as well, because knowing all the bits and pieces in Fabric, it's a lot. So it's definitely like an expert level skill. I do, on the other hand, think that there is a place for this higher level, you know, looking at everything in Fabric kind of certification at this moment of time, because people are just getting started. So that's the kind of information we do need in the beginning. It's the kind of knowledge that people do need in the beginning. And kind of once you get that landscape kind of scoped out, then it's easier to go into the details as well and actually get that experience about real life implementations. Because I think Fabric is in a unique place because a lot of people who are taking the exams don't yet necessarily have the hands-on experience of working with it in production environments because it is so new. Some people do, but not everybody. I think most people don't have that yet.
Yeah, well, that kind of makes sense, because the way that I approach, or I feel are valid approaches to certifications, are, yes, you've been working with the platform, right? This could be anything, right? So you were talking about SQL Server, Oracle, you know, any products, any vendors that offer a certification for their products. You could have been working with it for a while. You're very comfortable, and yes, you wanted the kudos of taking the certification. You may have found a couple of little items in there that you didn't know about, and good time to, you know, learn up a little bit before you take the cert. Absolutely fantastic. Also, from the other side, and this is probably relevant to the DP600, is that the platform is new. People are getting hands-on with it. No one person is going to tell you, well, I'm an expert in Fabric and I've been using it for years, so I'm just going to take the certification just to sort of tick some boxes. It's like, no, you've been using it for, relatively speaking, a short period of time. So the certification hasn't existed for that long. And it's an opportunity for people to learn the platform and to get hands-on and look at the skills being measured. And there's a ton of content out there for the DP600. Will Needham, so you can find him on YouTube, on LinkedIn, goes by the sort of tag of Learn Microsoft Fabric, has a fantastic DP600 free course basically for 6 hours to sort of go through. But Nikola Illich has gone through DP600. Haney, I mean, at Data Toboggan, you've got a DP600 session. It has become a very popular session, but a very popular certification as well. Loads of people all over social media, LinkedIn, every day people are popping up saying, I've taken the exam and I've passed it, or I'm just about to take the exam and what should I know, and such and such. And you have to say that it's had a far greater uptake than the DP500, which included Synapse Analytics and was branded as an enterprise data analyst, which I think confused most people.
But that one was also legendary for being difficult. I never got around to doing it, unfortunately. But I've been talking to a number of people that all said that they were sort of kind of squeaking by because it did test you on some really surprisingly deep things. So from what I gathered, it's an associate level certification. It probably aimed a bit too high. So it would probably have made more sense as an expert level certification. But then, hey, they took it away.
Exactly. You had DAX on one hand and Python and R visuals, but also were testing you on table distributions in large-scale data warehousing systems, aka dedicated. That's quite a lot for people to remember for a certification.
So I'm curious, Heini, did you do the DP600 yet?
No, I'm actually doing it in just a day or two or so.
Oh, really? Andy, you've done it?
Yes, the beta.
Ah, you did the beta, right?
Yes, I did the beta.
I will do it sooner rather than later, but I'm going to go on vacation first, so maybe I don't remember anything when I come back, or half of the damn thing has changed. Yes. We'll see.
There have been, well, funny you should say that. There have been some minor tweaks, just a couple, not that many. So this is, and to be honest with you, DP 500 never really changed that much. There was a couple of little subheading changes and just some clarifications, but other than that, it did not fundamentally change. It would be wholly unfair for Microsoft to shift things too much too early.
True, but something that we also were talking about was using certifications, or let me rephrase, using the certification things that are out there, the resources, as a map for learning, because a lot of these things are enormous. I mean, looking from the outside at Fabric and going, holy crap, that's a lot of things to think about. How do I even structure getting there? Because it's a pretty big thing to try to grasp. And that's where I think the learn stuff comes in, and it is absolutely fantastic for pointing out where do you need to go? Will you be able to pass the DP600 from doing only the learn stuff? Yes, I think you can. You're going to squeak by, but you're going to be able to do it. If nothing else, it's a great way to show you where your holes are in your understanding. I've gone through the whole thing, and there was a couple of things. There were a couple of things that I went, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. So really, really useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I often use for prepping for a certification is the skills measured list. It's a little, dry and nitty gritty, but if you really go kind of heading by heading and check, do I know something about this? And if you can authentically say yes, it's kind of a sign, okay, I know that part. And you can kind of figure out where are your gaps in your learning from that perspective. And I often look at that because that is essentially what they are saying that they're measuring you on. Of course, the Learn modules, I think, try to align with that, but it's kind of good to have that in your head as well. So really useful as well.
Yeah. That skills measured document that has around 50 individual skills being measured, you can actually link each one of those to a Learn page in the documentation. And I'll drop a link in the chat and on the YouTube video when we upload it to my blog, where I have literally done that. Every single skill measured, there is a link to the Learn documentation to go and do it. But it does tie up as a whole as well. But you're expected to go through each of those skills measured. So
you're going to go into that document, and then you're going to find the line that says, "Do you know with DAX?" And that you cannot answer yes to that question unless you're Marco Russo or Alberto Ferrari.
No, you have to say sì.
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 Sì. Molto bene. Which kind of brings us to the whole thing. Do you feel ready to take the certification? It's like, do you feel ready to go into production? Which is one of the worst segues I think I've ever done into
Yes.
How about Fabric from a production ready perspective? Would you, with no hesitation, start running a project in Fabric? If so, yes, okay, explain why. And if no, equally explain why.
Okay. So, I mean, to be honest with you, it was actually the perfect segue because, like we said, it's a relatively new product. So people are doing, the certification to get up to speed. From a practical perspective, well, yeah, this isn't a toy. This is a platform that companies will spend money on, and they want an investment, or they want a return on their investment, and they want a useful data platform. And in terms of feeling comfortable productionizing Fabric, I think the top level answer is yes. And then the granular answer is it depends on which service I'm going to use. So even though, and I think I pretty much say this in every session, discussion, blog post, I'm not really much of a Spark developer. However, I would totally feel comfortable productionizing a Spark/Lakehouse workload within Fabric. I think that's extremely stable. That is, again, touch wood, a big wooden desk here. I haven't really had any problems in months with using the Spark/Lakehouse side of things. So I think they're doing a really great job there. Yes, they are. Microsoft are continually releasing features. They've got their native Fabric engine, which is a little bit like the Databricks Photon engine. It's a proprietary engine to sort of accelerate Spark workloads. They're releasing that. They're constantly evolving what they call their Fabric runtime, which is a combination of the Spark and the Delta Lake functionality. So I think, and that's like on the third version now. I think the third version is currently in preview. We've got 2 stable versions in there already. So yeah, I really feel comfortable doing that. Warehouse perspective, I am going to say yes, but there are some workarounds. There are some features coming to the warehouse service that people would probably look at and say, wow, are you telling me that those features aren't here yet? Now's not the time to go into, each individual tiny feature and tell you what is and isn't there. But there are some workarounds for that to get a Fabric warehousing project up and running. And I'm comfortable implementing those workarounds. There's not many of them, but they could be a red light for a lot of people. And actually, when I talk about the warehouse service, I have a sort of a red, amber, green in terms of features that aren't there. So features that aren't there, I've put in a green, in the green traffic light to say, you know what, I don't really care. Then we've got some more sort of amber-based features that I think, well, you might not like it, but these aren't there. So, for example, merge. The merge statement isn't there yet. Some features could be a complete blocker for people. The ability to alter tables, quite a big thing, right? I have a very satisfactory workaround for that. For others, that might be a bit of a blocker. I'm not really touching the real-time streaming too much, so I couldn't really say whether I would be comfortable productionizing that. Even if it was, I think it is generally available, I believe. I'm not too sure, but yeah, I think it depends on the service I'm using. But for the most part, I'm getting more comfortable.
Yeah, I would have maybe made my short answer a maybe. But my more granular answer would be very much in line with Andy. I've been working with a Spark site quite a bit, and for that, yeah, it's actually mostly really stable. I've of course managed to be the one that has come across some bugs when I've done a session. I've also done, plenty of sessions where those have not been an issue, but I've had that happen once in the recent months, which is always a nice surprise. But anyways, yes, there's some bugs, but I think it's getting less and less, and depending on the workload or experience that you're in, it's maybe at slightly different levels. And the nice thing is that Spark is Spark. Spark has been around for a long time, so that is definitely like a stable service in itself. And how they've implemented in Fabric actually works really, really well. And then also, of course, everything on the Power BI side, that is very mature as well. There's no issues on that side either. So, as Andy put it, it depends on which experiences or workloads you're going to be using from Fabric, whether it is production ready. The side where I have a little more issues is the state of security and, CI/CD capabilities and things like that. But maybe we'll let Alexander get in like a general feeling before we dive into those topics.
So it's funny you should say that, because I would generally agree with what you both said. You can absolutely do some pretty serious damage with Fabric. It's a good product. It was not ready when it was generally available or made generally available. It's not ready yet. It will definitely get there. I mean, every month we get, 60 pages of news and changes. Ain't nobody be able to keep up with that. But I think the biggest challenge that I see with Fabric is preconceptions. So you mentioned workarounds, Andy. That is awesome. And I think more people could definitely benefit from figuring out what do they really want to solve, instead of, I've always solved it this way, I want to solve it this way, like alter table, for instance. But if I hear that data warehouse or data warehouse in Fabric is SQL, then I'm going to be bringing my preconceptions of what that means. I am going to be bringing my almost 30 years of experience with SQL Server, and it is not the same engine.
I had an idea about this that came to my mind, because I was thinking that I think this is very specific to people coming from the Microsoft SQL background, because there is multiple variations of SQL out there. And, there's PostgreSQL, and they're all a little different. So why are we so caught up in this being a little different?
I think that's a good point, but I would also argue that it doesn't matter if it's MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, whatever. They all have basic alter table stuff. So
yes, but that's very true.
But yes, so I'm bringing with me a preconception of what the engine can do. Take the pipelines. It's the same name as Synapse pipelines. Ergo, I am expecting it to behave exactly the same way. No, it doesn't. It's not the same thing. Almost, but not the same. So
similar.
Yeah, exactly. So you sort of kind of trip over these hurdles that are not technical per se, but they're in here. So they definitely have some challenges from a marketing perspective to set expectations, because this is, as you mentioned, Andy, a very, very new piece of software, and it is enormous. Just the scope of what the thing can do is just crazy. And sure, we can definitely look into security. I mean, we can talk about that for a while.
Before we head there, just maybe like one last comment regarding what you just pointed out is that kind of if we come from the really like technical viewpoint of this has to solve what I'm used to solving in a specific way, we then also kind of disregard the different angle that Fabric is taking to solving a data platform solution, which is, I think, kind of what is at the forefront is making it easy to use for people. How well they've done that is maybe, in some places I don't see it yet. Some places, yes, but they are really aiming for it to be easy to use even for business people. And the other aspect is having this mentality of being your kind of data domain teams be able to work as their own units. And both of those aspects have benefits that can, for especially a person in the organizations who is thinking about, should we use Fabric? If they are more business oriented, they might be like, those are huge benefits. I don't really care if we can solve the technical problem exactly as it had been solved in past tools. But they actually see the benefit of those other aspects that Fabric brings.
Indeed. And Haney, what have I told you about waving your arms around?
I shouldn't wave my hands.
No, because
I'm Finnish.
Yes, stop being Finnish with the microphone, please.
Or I should start being Finnish with a microphone. Sorry, I will try to be less expressive.
Yeah. But I agree with that as well. And the flip side of that, I'm all for making things easier, but there's this cutoff point where things become too easy. Chaotic, exactly. You're opening the door to all kinds of mayhem. And just see what happens if you take a SQL Server person and give them Spark. They're going to be bringing their preconceptions of how to do things and not really understanding how Spark behaves from a parallelism perspective. And you're going to see the craziest designs. They work. Almost like if you get a newbie writing SQL, it's going to work, but it's going to be dead slow. And since it works, you might not realize that there are way smarter ways of doing it. So what I'm saying is the three of us, we're going to be set for life, just working as consultants with Fabric.
Oh, especially with the thousands and thousands of libraries for Spark available as well. If you install a SQL Server, for example, you've got a set language, you've got a set number of services, documentation to understand those services, off you go. But in the world of Fabric and even Synapse Spark and Databricks and anywhere that can host Spark, the number of libraries that you can install is incredible. So just conforming to a standard set of, let's say, your data engineering toolbox could be different from company to company. You could work for one company and they use great expectations for data cleansing. Somewhere else they might implement another pattern or another library and so on and so forth. It's both exciting, but it's also I approach it with a lot of trepidation as well, because you never quite know what's being used.
Agreed.
And I do think this all links also to our security topic, because if we give people freedom, then we need to have ways to also ensure that things are secure, that we have some kind of guardrails in place, people actually have access to what they need access to, and so forth. So should we talk about that a little bit?
I think we absolutely should. And I'll start because this is the single most frustrating part for me. This really grinds my gears. And that is the concept of ownership. So if you create a Fabric resource, that's going to be owned by someone, not something, someone, a proper human being. And that is not the way we architect things in Azure. That's not the way we've ever architected things in Azure, because people quit. People disappear for reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be a bad day for everybody involved if someone that owns the lakehouse or the warehouse or a pipeline no longer is with the company for whatever reason. Some components you can transfer ownership, but you're really just kicking the ball down the line. You do not solve the problem. Some things are not possible to change ownership for. You need to recreate them. And there are a couple of ways to try to work around this. One is having a dummy user as a service principal. But hey, we've had service principals and managed, what is it called? Managed
identities. Yeah.
For years and years and years. These are not new things. Why on earth was this not part of the GA stuff? That is the one thing that it keeps me up at night. It's nuts. I really don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is the thing about the amalgamation of the different products and services into Fabric. So, you know, if we look at the Azure services, as you said, so let's talk about Synapse Analytics. If you provisioned a Synapse workspace, the workspace owned itself. It exposed a managed identity, and you would set up RBAC controls. Some people could be administrators. Some people could just view the resource, but no one person owned it. I mean, there were administrators, and I hope that organizations have more than just one administrator, just in case. But you go into the world of Fabric, and obviously workloads have been moved into the world of Power BI and its security model and its way of doing things. And this has been an ongoing issue for several years. So we look at Power BI data flows, Gen 1. I still love data flows, absolutely sort of fantastic. Sort of intermediate data storage and processing. Alexander's not looking too keen. Personally, I like them. We've had challenges there. One person is an owner. And if ever you're having to troubleshoot a data flow and it's owned by someone else, you've got to take over. There's issues with that. We're in the same world. So we have had some features, and you know, we'll talk about this in a little bit when we come on to our F64 chat. At the moment, we don't have the ability to just assign an item, a lakehouse, a warehouse, and say, well, that's owned by its own identity, or that's owned by a service principal. And then everyone can breathe a huge sigh of relief because, you know, person A who created that super important lakehouse and loading processes and pipelines and notebooks has left, and the account's been locked. And now we have to scramble around trying to find various APIs to try and change ownership, because you can't do it in the GUI, even if you want to.
Yet.
And I do think we will need more granular permissions going forward, because in the Power BI world, it was more like workspace level, but I do think with how Fabric is evolving, we're going to need more granular permissions within a workspace. And in a way, I think Microsoft has painted a vision of this already. So with talking about one security, and it can maybe even trip people up, because there has been this notion that you can kind of govern access in one place and so forth. And then that kind of applies everywhere that you need. But that's not quite the reality yet. And we need to keep that in mind when we are doing implementations at the current stage.
Yeah, I mean, the one security is this, I was about to say pipe dream. It's not a pipe dream. It is a huge undertaking. I don't think I can adequately describe how complex that specific thing is. Just that small word, one security, you have no idea. And we are sort of kind of seeing the precursor to this, because we have as Heini mentioned, the Power BI way of doing security, which was based around workspaces. And if someone were allowed inside of a workspace, well, you could pretty much see everything. So everything that you wanted to be customer facing, that was going to go into an app. That doesn't really fly if you have lake houses, warehouses, pipelines, God knows what. So at the moment, it's a lot of duct tape and prayers to get the things to gel. They have some work to do, and I do not envy the people working with security because they will be busy almost for the rest of time. But it's an interesting challenge.
Yes, yeah, and there is a security white paper available. Again, everything we chat about, I'll put links in, links in for people to go and read up. But yeah, the security white paper was authored to pull together several already documented security processes. So, because security covers obviously authentication, it covers authorization. What can you do? It covers the networking that we'll come on to in a minute. So it covers such a huge area, and we have currently the Power BI way of having permissions in workspaces, in which, as you said, Alexander, if someone's given a workspace permission, well, hey ho, have fun, because you're going to be able to see all the lake houses and notebooks and warehouses that you want to get at. But each of those items has its own security as well. So yeah, again, I don't, I can fully appreciate why one security is taking a bit longer, just because they're trying to, get the features in the other services cranked out, get them into general availability, get the platform, stable, and then bring in this one security, because it is a huge undertaking and I think it's a huge undertaking to get right as well.
Yeah.
Security is I think you're really hitting the nail on the head there. It needs to be done right, because backing out of a poor security architecture is fiendishly difficult. Which sort of kind of brings us to so this is a bit of a philosophical conversation, I think. Everything in Azure by default is public, right? It's publicly available from anywhere in the world, sort of kind of. That's the whole point of the cloud. But we generally don't want our stuff out there. I prefer, if I set up an Azure SQL Server, to have that one not be open to the general web. I want that only to be open to my virtual network. It's like I don't want to have people knowing where my door is. They need to first find the door to the apartment building, and if they get it through that, then they can come knocking at my door. Otherwise, I don't want people running around my door. That's my SQL Server. And that's a basic security architecture. There's no point in having everything available for every script kiddie in the world to come poke at my door. You can sort of kind of do this in Fabric. You can connect a Fabric instance or Fabric capacity to your virtual network. But there are two things. One is the fact that you can only do so if you have an F64 SKU or higher. We're going to come back to that in a bit. The other side that people don't really talk about is that if you do this, you lose a lot of the functionality inside of Fabric that is sort of kind of taken for granted. So it definitely comes with a caveat, but be that as it may, what's your opinion on essentially gating what I think is a pretty basic security feature behind an enormous cost? I'm all for charging for it. I see no reason why a private endpoint should be free, because it's not free anywhere else in Azure. But I can't even get the option unless I have an F64 or higher, which, so everybody knows, is roughly $5,000 a month.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like it to be a bolt-on. I'd like it to be, I think, Haney, you actually raised this. Yeah. Add it as a bolt-on service or a chargeable service.
Did we just lose Andy?
I think he at least froze.
I think I'm just having slight connectivity issues at the end there. But yes.
So you look
additional. I might
again.
I might be frozen for a handful of periods of time. But yes, please make them, just discreetly chargeable features. A private endpoint within Synapse costs £20 a month, £15-20 a month, something like that. Let's have the option to do the same thing if we're running workloads on less than an F64. Please, Microsoft. And thing is, though, I think that's the last I'm going to talk on this subject ever, because I have annoyed enough people about it. I don't want to get in anyone's bad books for being overly aggressive about this. But people know how I feel about it.
And I mean, there has been a lot of conversations internally around this. So Microsoft knows exactly the stance of the MVP community. We are surprisingly consistent.
Unanimous.
Yeah, we're pretty much unanimous, which is rare, which is also very rare for us to stick to time. So we're actually out of time, but we managed to cover everything that we hope to cover. Any last words?
Well, I think from me is, again, thank you very much. I do enjoy these. Sort of, they're almost like State of the Nation podcasts.
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone for watching. And yes, we still got a lot of the conference left. I mean, because we're going out halfway through the day. So we've got another 3 tracks to cover. The recordings will be up pending speaker approval, will be up on YouTube in a few weeks. So, thank you very much for viewing. And I hope you found the sessions really interesting and useful.
Indeed. So enjoy the rest of Data Toboggan. And we will be back with our regular scheduled programming after the vacation. So sometime in August. So until then, have a wonderful summer. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you for listening to this episode of Knee Deep in Tech. Knee Deep in Tech is a bi-weekly technology podcast hosted by Alexander Arvidsson, Simon Binder, and Heini Hilmarinen. If you have any feedback, questions, or would like to be part of an episode, please reach out to us on social media or via email at podcast@kneedeepintech.com.